In this session, we're going to look at a few of the parables of Jesus. We need a little context here. So first, we need to know that at some point in Scripture, Jesus was accused of being a drunkard and a glutton. Why? Because he went to parties, and he enjoyed partying, and he hung out with the wrong crowd. Jesus didn't hang out with all the religious people. He hung out with the people who were getting drunk and just really living it up at these parties. And Jesus loved those people. Problem was that these people were the sinful people. And not only that, but he wouldn't stop at just hanging out with the sinners. He would hang out with the tax collectors too. And they're in like a separate category of sinner altogether. Like these people are just the lowest of the low. You don't hang out with them at all. And the religious leaders were really upset about this. So in Luke chapter 15, the tax collectors and the sinners were coming near him to listen to him. Both the Pharisees and the scribes began to grumble, saying, "This man receives sinners and eats with them." Right? They're disgusted by this. Now, I'm pretty sure I've mentioned before, but I'll mention again here. Eating with somebody in this culture is a very intimate act. So you think about what happens. Bread is a really common part of the meal. So you get some bread, you tear off a piece of bread, you pass on the rest of the loaf, you eat the bread, you dip it in the spices and the hummus, and that's good. The hummus is so good. You're just eating the bread, double dipping, right? There are no double dipping rules in the Middle East, right? And you just back and forth. The saliva is going everywhere. If you think about what's going on, it's really gross. And that's why it's so intimate, right? If you think about what's really happening with when you kiss somebody, like a passionate kiss, really it's kind of gross, but it's fun. And eating was looked on in a similar way, right? Not a romantic, it's nothing like that. It's not like Jesus was making out with these people. It wasn't seen like that. But there's a level of intimacy when you share food with somebody. That's why the Jews would never eat with Gentiles, right? Plus, the kosher laws and all that stuff made it even harder. But, the Gentiles, they're unclean people. We would never eat with them because we'd become unclean like them. It's that intimate. So here's Jesus eating with sinners, which is bad enough, but then tax collectors on top of it. They're sinful people who are siding with Rome and our struggles against Rome, and they're taking advantage of us, their own people. They're traitors. They've betrayed us, right? So these are like the lowest of the low. And the religious leaders look at Jesus eating with these people, and they're utterly disgusted by it. So Jesus tells them a series of parables. And he starts with this one. What man among you, this is Jesus speaking to the religious leaders, what man among you, if he has 100 sheep and has lost one of them, does not leave the 99 in the open pasture and go after the one which is lost until he finds it? When he has found it, he lays it on his shoulders, rejoicing. And when he comes home, he calls together his friends and his neighbors, saying to them, "Rejoice with me, for I have found my sheep which was lost." I tell you that in that same way, there will be more joy in heaven over one sinner who repents than over 99 righteous persons who have no need of repentance. Right, so that one parable is just packed. But instead of digging through this one, I'm going to move right on to the next one here. Jesus continues, or what woman, if she has 10 silver coins and loses one coin, does not light a lamp and sweep the house and search carefully until she finds it? When she has found it, she calls together her friends and neighbors, saying, "Rejoice with me, for I have found the coin which I had lost." In the same way, I tell you, there is joy in the presence of the angels of God over one sinner who repents. Now, these two parables are very similar. And the Pharisees, I'm sure, will pick up on what they mean right away. So Jesus is hanging out with these sinful people, and Jesus sort of explains the parable. He doesn't usually do that, but he gives a little explanation, right? So there's a person who loses something very valuable to the person, searches for this thing that's lost, finds it, and then throws a party. Invites friends over, there's a party. And the Pharisees, I'm sure, understand it, right? Jesus, like I said, he kind of explains it. There's more joy in heaven over one sinner who repents than over 99 righteous who don't need repentance. In other words, God cares about these people. These people are lost, and I'm the one going out to find these people, bring them back, and we're having a party. And, this is a good thing. Now, up till now, the Pharisees, the religious leaders, they're not likely to really agree with Jesus or like what he's saying, but they get it. They understand it. But then Jesus continues with this third parable. In this third parable, he's expanding on the first two, and he makes the story much bigger and far more shocking to these religious people. And we will need to know a little bit about Middle Eastern culture. The first thing we need to know is that there is tremendous respect for your elders, especially your father. And whoever your father is, even if he's like the worst person in the world, you respect your father. You show your father great honor and respect, no matter what. If you're a younger person and an older person walks into a room, you rise to show respect for that person. If you're an older person and somebody older than you walks in, you rise, right? There's a hierarchy of respect and showing honor to people. You would never talk back to a person. You wait to speak until the person is spoken. It's just all these different things, ways to show honor. This is an honor and shame culture, which I've mentioned before. The worst thing that can happen to a family is that somebody from the family brings shame on the family. And it doesn't matter that that person did it. That person is part of the family, so the family has shame. And if the family is shamed, horrible things can happen in the society. So a lot more to say about that, but I think that'll do for now. So Jesus starts this third parable. A man had 2 sons. So older son, younger son, right? The younger son said to the father, "Father, give me my share of the estate that falls to me." Now, everybody listening to this parable would immediately be shocked. I mean, they wouldn't even take it seriously, because that would never happen. You don't say, "Father, give me my portion of the inheritance. Give me my portion of the estate." What you're saying when you say that is, think about what an inheritance is, right? A parent dies and leaves all the belongings to the children, and the children split it. To say, "Give me my portion of the inheritance," is saying, "Dad, I wish you were dead. In fact, I'm going to pretend you're dead. Give me what's mine. Give me my part of the inheritance. You are dead to me. I have nothing to do with you. I have no father," right? It's to that degree. You would never, ever say that. In fact, I heard a story about somebody asking a Middle Eastern person, somebody growing up and living in the Middle East, read this part of the parable and saw the look on the guy's face and said, what would happen if somebody said that? And it was just, you can't imagine that son would be severely beaten. There was no way he would get the inheritance. He would be beaten to send a strong message. You don't ever ask that question. You don't treat your father that way. That brings shame on us. It's a big deal. Everybody in the audience here is shocked that Jesus would even allude to this. Right, so a man had 2 sons. The younger of them said to his father, "Father, give me my share of the estate that falls to me." And instead of beating this child and teaching him a lesson, the father did it. The father divided the wealth between the sons and gave the younger son his portion of the inheritance. Again, even more shocking to the audience. Not many days later, the younger son gathered everything together and went out on a journey to a distant country. Now keep in mind, this son is leaving his home. You don't leave your family. Families in this culture will usually, a family will settle someplace, the family grows, aunts and uncles, grandparents, great-grandparents, more aunts, second cousins, third cousins, once removed. You're all living there. You turn into a city. You don't leave. You never leave your family unless you have a really good, legitimate reason to. This son left the family after saying, "I want you to be dead, Father. Give me my inheritance. I'm out of here," there would be great shame coming on this family. And on the son, too, but especially on the family as a whole. The father, the other son, the surrounding family, the extended family, great shame would come on them because of the son. Everybody in the audience knows this, and they're shocked. So he goes off on his journey. He lives it up. He squandered his estate with loose living, and you can figure out what loose living would be in that culture. Now, when he had spent everything, a severe famine occurred in that country, and he began to be impoverished. Now, everybody in the crowd would say, "It serves him right. I hope he dies. He's not deserving of anything." But, he's impoverished. That's not bad enough for him. So this youngest son went and hired himself out to one of the citizens of that country. He sent him into his fields. So he hired this younger son, sent the younger son into his fields to feed swine. And again, the story just keeps getting worse and worse and worse. The swine are unclean animals. A Jew will never go near a swine, never touch a swine. You don't eat bacon. You don't, they're unclean. They're disgusting, horrid animals. You wouldn't go near them. Here's this youngest son did these atrocious things, and now he's taking care of the swine. This is how low he is sunk. He would have gladly filled his stomach with the pods that the swine were eating, which would also be unclean. But he would have gladly eaten them because he was that desperate, but no one was giving anything to him. He was barely able to stay alive. And again, the audience would be saying, "Good. Hope he perishes, just horrible death." When he came to his senses, he said, "How many of my father's hired men have more than enough bread? I am dying here with hunger. I will get up and go to my father, and I will say to him, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and in your sight.'" And everybody listening would say, "What chutzpah! How dare he even think about his father, let alone plan to go back to his father?" And he continues here, "Father, I have sinned against heaven and in your sight. I am no longer worthy to be called your son." And everybody in the audience would say, "You're blank right. You're no longer worthy to be called his son. You should be dead. And make me," this son says, "make me one of your hired hands." Right? "I'm no longer your son. I've done horrible things. Just make me one of your hired hands. Just keep me alive." So he got up and came to his father, and I guarantee you Jesus' audience was shocked that Jesus would even suggest this type of thing could happen. And the chutzpah that this child had, and if you don't know what chutzpah is, you can look it up, because I don't know if children are listening here. But he's got guts, I'll put it that way. He's going and he comes to the father, and while he was a long way off, his father saw him and felt compassion for him. The father would be the head of the household. He gave the inheritance, which means he had the inheritance to give, so he's the head of this household. And he wouldn't have the responsibilities that the children would have, the sons and the servants would have. For him to be seeing this younger son a long way off really implies that he was looking for him, hoping, longing for him to come back home. And so, while this youngest son was still a long way off, the father saw him and felt compassion for him and ran and embraced him and kissed him. The head of the household would never run. First of all, the way he would be dressed would prohibit it. He would have to pull parts of his garments up over his knees, which would bring shame on him. And so the father's bringing more shame on himself than the son had already brought, so that he could run, bringing yet more shame on himself, and get to his son. None of this makes any sense at all to the audience. He embraced him and kissed him. The son started his pre-planned speech. "Father, I have sinned against heaven in your sight, and I am no longer worthy to be called your son." The father interrupted him. Yeah. And called to the slave, saying, "Quick, bring the best robe and put it on him. Put a ring on his hand. Bring sandals, put sandals on his feet. Bring the fattened calf, kill it. Let us eat and celebrate. For this son of mine was dead and has come to life again. He was lost and has been found." And they began to celebrate. The son didn't even finish his speech. Father wouldn't let him. The father is so thrilled that his son is back. This son was dead, now he's alive. And Jesus, of course, is demonstrating how God feels about these sinners. Why is Jesus hanging out, eating with these sinners, these tax collectors and other horrible sinners? It's because God feels this way about them. All of the religious leaders are listening to this story and they're appalled. They're shocked. This is scandalous. This would never happen. And Jesus is saying, no, this is exactly what is happening. Exactly what's happening. But Jesus goes on from there. His older son was in the field. Now, I don't know why he was still out in the field. Right? Did the father send a messenger and the older son just ignore the messenger? My guess is, as a father, putting myself in that culture, in that position, I probably would send a messenger saying, "Go to my oldest son, and tell him come back to the house." And the oldest son is, think teenager. I'm not going back to that. I'm staying here. Probably just ignored the message. I don't know. But either way, the oldest son was still out in the field. He started approaching the house and he heard music and dancing and said, "What's going on?" Right? Maybe the servant did go out and say, "Hey, Dad wants you back to the house." Didn't say why. And on his way back, he hears all the music. Here's a DJ outside and, all this commotion. So he summoned up one of the servants and began asking, "What's happening? What's going on?" And the servant said, "Your brother has come home. Your father has killed the fattened calf because he received him back safe and sound." Well, the older brother became angry and was not willing to go in. His father came out and began pleading with him. The older son answered and said to his father, and generally you wouldn't talk to a father like this in this culture, but the older son has had it. The older son says, "Look, for many years I've been serving you. I have never neglected a command of yours ever. And yet you've never given me a young goat so that I could celebrate with my friends. But this son of yours comes home who has devoured your wealth with prostitutes. You kill the fattened calf for him." And the father says, "Son, you have always been with me. All that is mine is yours. But we had to celebrate and rejoice, for this brother of yours was dead and has begun to live. He was lost and has been found." And that's where Jesus ends the parable. We don't know the religious leaders' reaction to this. We can certainly guess at it. But think about what Jesus is saying to them. Now, the religious leaders, if you're following at all carefully here, the religious leaders are the older son. And what Jesus is saying is that these people, that you're so upset, you're so upset that I'm eating with these sinners. But the sinners are the younger brother, right? They've gone out, they've done these horrible things, but they're coming back. Think about the celebration we should be having. You're the older son, you religious leaders, you're the older son. You should be thrilled that your brother's back. Instead, you're upset because I threw a party. Well, think about this from the older brother's perspective. The father said, "Everything I have is yours. All that is mine is yours." That's a key to this whole parable here. That was literally true. So everything the father has will get passed on to these two sons. And in that culture, the older, the firstborn, gets a double inheritance because that older son will eventually take over the father's responsibilities. So the father is running the household. When the father dies, the older son takes over all that responsibility, has to look out for the welfare of the household, will need the resources to do it. So the older son gets a double portion of the inheritance. So in this case, the inheritance will get split 3 ways. The older son gets 2 portions, the younger son gets 1 portion. So 2 portions to the older son, 1 portion to the younger son. The younger son said, "I wish you were dead, give me my inheritance." The father gave it to him, and he left and squandered it. Well, what's left? Just the inheritance of the older son. Literally, when the father said, "What's mine is yours, everything that belongs to me is yours," he meant it very literally. Everything that's left goes to the older son. But what is your money? The fattened calf is part of your bank account. In other words, the father is so thrilled that this younger son came home that he took part of the older son's inheritance, and a good chunk of it, and spent it to throw this massive party to celebrate the younger son. There's a cost to the younger son for the brother returning. This brother that's brought shame on the family. It's brought shame on him. And he's saying, my younger brother doesn't deserve any of this. You're spending what's mine to celebrate him. And there's that bitterness there. And what Jesus is saying to the Pharisees and religious leaders is, yes, there is a cost to you to welcome back these sinners. But you should be rejoicing that these people are turning back to the Lord. Just like the one whose sheep ran off, and the shepherd left the 99, the righteous ones, to go find this one sinner who ran off, and brought it back and threw a party, spent money to invite all the friends over. And it's not just a couple of guys coming over for a beer. This is a party. You're spending money. You're spending some of the little bit that you have. You're spending it to celebrate what's just happened. The woman who lost the coin gathered all her friends through a party, spending money to celebrate finding this valuable coin. That's how much the coin means to her. That's how much the sheep means to the shepherd. That's how much the youngest son, you and I, mean to God. And we have to ask, who am I in this story? Do I celebrate when the younger son returns? Well, that's the easy part of the answer, because most of us would say yes. Am I willing to pay the cost to myself for that to happen? That's a little bit harder. And what about Jesus going out and being intimate, partying with these horrible people? It's almost as though the father left the house and went to where the younger son was sleeping with these prostitutes and getting drunk and shooting up, and Jesus was there hanging out with those people. What do we do with that? Right? These are the questions that religious people are asking, and Jesus' answer doesn't even address it. It's just the thrill of any one of these people returning home is beyond compare to anything else that's going on around us. The religious people weren't having it, but Jesus wouldn't have it any other way. So the conflict here between Jesus and the religious people keeps growing and growing and growing. And in the next session, we're going to get to the last week or so of Jesus' life, and we'll see all of this anger and resentment and the bitterness, the danger, everything come to a big climax. So that's where we're headed.